Hey, everybody. I'm back. I haven't talked to you in a while. Thank you so much for joining me today. In just a minute, I'm going to welcome my guest, Richard Paul Evans, who is a New York Times bestselling author and wrote another incredible book called A Christmas Memory. And I can't wait for you to meet him. Before we get started, though, I always love to see where you are watching from. So write in the comment section where in the world you're watching from. And I always like hearing about how your holidays are going, how everything is going, what's going on in your mind. But today we are going to, he's got a message. Yeah, you need Google Chrome. He just said he's having a hard time jumping in. So I'm going to bear with me. Carl Martini would help if I had my glasses on from Hudsonville, Michigan. Hello, Tim Tim doesn't say, he's watching on Facebook. Hello, Greg from California. Hey, John, how are you? Hey, Tanya from Idaho, how are you? Tanya, is the skiing good there yet? How is it going there? Hey, Janet Ristoff, how are you? Hey, Kevin from snowy Omaha. It's snowing there already? That's so cool. Hey, Jeff from Walled Lake, how are you? Hey, William, how are you doing? Hey, hey, Brenda from Augusta, Kansas. Hey, Diana from North Carolina. Hey, Tim from Illinois. Oh my goodness. Eke, watching from Sweden. Wow. How do you pronounce that name? Been to Sweden several times. Love it there. Okay. We've got Wanda from Albuquerque. I'm going to start posting these. Hello, Brenda. Hello, Tim. Hello, William. Hello, Jeff. Oh, here we've got Richard coming in. So stand by, guys. I'm going to welcome in Richard Paul Evans. Richard, how are you?
Good. Hi, Jermaine.
Thanks for joining me. Gosh, I had just introduced you. I wanted to get the ball rolling, but you are a multiple New York Times bestselling author, have written yet another phenomenal book. I had the honor and privilege of getting an advance copy. And I got to tell you, you've heard this before, I'm sure. Made me laugh and cry, and it has such an incredible space for loss and grief and healing, and also shows the power of forgiveness. Thank you, first of all, for joining me today, Richard, and tell us a little bit about this book, if you will.
This is, I'm looking for a copy here. This is A Christmas Memory, and you got to read it when it was still in manuscript form.
Yeah.
So this is one of my favorite books. I've written 45 New York Times bestselling books, and this may be my favorite. It's the most autobiographical. It's based on my childhood, and powerful in terms of its impact. So it's takes place in 1967. It's when I was a child and moved from California to Utah. The world was very much like it is now in terms of there were racial riots going on. There was a lot of dissension. We had the Vietnam War, and it was about a really hard time in my life. And a next door neighbor, an old black man who took care of me when my parents were really absent, and just watched out for me. So it's a story about compassion and caring, and I think it's a good read.
It's not a good read. It's an excellent read. It's an amazing read, and I cried. I loved it, and I don't know how you do it. I'll be speaking with you about this, but you have an incredible way of bringing the reader in, talking about simple. It's not about writing fancy, big, long, extended words, but you have an incredible ability to draw the reader in, captivate them. It's just a page turner. And speak, if you will, if you don't mind, a little bit about your personal history and why you decided to include this in your Christmas memory book.
Well, when I was young, it was a really hard time. My dad lost his job in California. ended up moving into an abandoned home that my grandmother had left abandoned for about 4 or 5 years. It was completely rat infested. You'd walk into a room and you could hear the mice and rats just scramble out, um, and it was a really difficult time. My mother was suffering from mental illness. She would lock herself in a room for days, and so as a 9-year-old boy, I was really on my own, and it was a really hard time. It was I had a teacher who was a bully. She was a nasty woman, and people wonder about they want to know Mrs. Covey. It's like, was she really that mean? It's like, yeah, she was abusive. She was a horrific woman. And I've met two people since the book became a national bestseller. I've met two people who knew her, who, and they both said the same thing. One said, actually, his wife had her and as a teacher, and said she still has PTSD. She's 50 years old and has PTSD from her. And another just said, I didn't have her, but I was terrified of her. She was just a nasty woman. And so all that parts, that was something that as a little boy, Ricky was dealing with. And so when I wrote the book, Shemaine, I did sit down and say I was going to write a biography. It was I was really sick last year at this time. I was really sick.
And
On
hopefully,
top of that,
we lost you for just a second.
oh, sorry. Yeah, I could only get on here on my phone to get in here, and I keep getting phone calls. So I wish I could block them somehow. Um, I I had pneumonia, and then on top of that, as sick as I was, I caught COVID, and I was in bed 20 hours a day. I stopped eating, and it was kind of scary. My friend had the same thing, and he passed away. It took his life, and in the middle of this, the last thing I'm thinking about is anything to do with writing or my career. And then this books just start coming to me. And so my wife, Carrie, brought me a notepad, and I just started writing it. And I thought, what you talk about COVID, the COVID fog, I thought it's probably going to be just stupid stuff from writing. Instead, 2 months later, when I started to recover, I started to read the notebook, and it brought tears to my eyes. I thought, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever written. And it's completely raw and vulnerable. And I sent it to my publisher, and the head of editorial read it, and she wrote back. She said, "It's 11 o'clock at night. I was starting to wanted to read a little bit of this book. I just finished it. I'm sobbing my eyes out, and it may be the best." She goes, "It's the most powerful thing I've ever written. I've never had a book move me emotionally like this book." She goes, "I'll let Simon and Schuster know that we have a very big book coming." And so that's kind of how it started. And I everyone I would give the book to would have these really profound emotional experiences reading the book. And you can always tell, because they don't tell you it's a good book. They tell you about their own life. When someone's really moved by something, it's because it related to their life. So they'll tell me stories about their childhood and their Mrs. Covey's and their Mr. Foster, who was the old man who took care of me.
And did you, when you were going through this, when you were 9 years old, living in an abandoned home, did you ever get the sense of of feeling jealous of people who had more, who had a loving family and two-parent home and a warm bed and warm hot meals to eat? Or how did you get through that?
Well, I make a statement, and some people might find it controversial. Because it was a poor neighborhood, I wasn't a whole lot different than the other people. And so poverty is pretty much a matter, I believe it's pretty much a matter of comparison. And so I do remember I wanted some, what do they call those? Oh, they're kind of boots, fry boots. They were very popular. I just remember my life would be complete if I could have some boots. I never got them, of course, but I do remember coveting fry boots because that was the cool thing. All the cool kids had them. And but outside of that, it's just like, well, it was just survival.
Mm.
Um, it's one of the things we did because we didn't have, we didn't have a lot of food. But my grandmother used to, an old Mormon woman would can everything. And so we had bottles of peaches and blueberries and apples that were canned that were like, 15 years old. And so we would eat a lot of that. But we had fruit trees in the back and a walnut tree. And I would just go back there and just eat a lot of fruit and walnuts. I had an old rusty hammer. I'd break the walnuts open and eat them till I get canker sores. And it's like, I didn't really think about other people or compare because it was there was no point in it. It's just like this was my life and just getting by day by day.
In the book, you talk about the main character has a little bit of a disability. Can you talk to that at all? Speak to that?
Well, he has Tourette syndrome. It's my story. I have Tourette syndrome, and that's why my Michael Vey character, my best-selling young adult book, it has Tourette syndrome. And it was actually about that time in my life that it manifested. It was just during the time my dad lost his job. I was 8 years old, and that's kind of I've learned it's kind of a common time. So what happened? My first Tourette sign was first tick was I shrugged. I was shrugging my shoulders, and I remember I couldn't stop. But I was actually at church one day. It started on a Sunday morning, and I can still remember it after 50 years. And I my mother told me to stop, and it's like you can't stop. And then she pointed to it was a man who was hunchback. And is probably like 95 years old. It's like she pointed and she goes, "You're going to look like that if you don't stop." And like, great, that was not helpful. So I just envisioned myself as being a disobedient boy who's going to be a hunchback by the age of 9. So one of the curious things with my Tourette syndrome, when I was diagnosed, the doctor asked if I like to touch sharp objects. And I laughed. I took 7 sharp objects out of my pocket. So like even right now, I usually take dollar bills and I pulled them. My wife calls them corners. And because sharp things in a very peculiar way bring me comfort.
Does it when you touch the sharp things, does it help you, like if you're going through an attack, a Tourette's attack, does it help calm you down and remove the physical situation that you're in?
Yeah, it's kind of the same. It's kind of the same release that a tick will give you. So like blinking your eyes or gulping or something. It's like, so my wife could always tell if I was under a lot of stress by how many corners she would find in my pockets at night.
Really?
Oh, it's like, oh, are you okay, honey? Is things hard? Are things hard at work or a lot of stress? Yeah.
So have you found anything other than that relieves the syndrome, Tourette syndrome? Diet, exercise, obviously.
No,
No. Okay.
no, it's a neurological disorder, and I've had people send me supplements, and it's almost offensive. It's like it's a neurological disorder. It's like it doesn't just go away. It's hardwired. I've been doing this since I was 3 years old, so um, it's just it is what it is. And the thing is, I didn't even know I had Tourette's. I just thought it was really weird. When we usually think of Tourette's, we think of coprolalia, where you shout out swear words, and I have that impulse.
You do?
In fact, I had this horrible impulse to spit in the face of famous people. I was actually in the White House, and I was with President Bill Clinton, and I realized I was going to spit on him, and not for any political reason. And I literally bit my tongue because you never want to spit on the president of the United States.
Right.
And bit my tongue, stepped back. My wife I don't know if Carrie got what was going on, but she just stepped right in and started talking to the president. And I just like, thank you.
Wow, that's a whole nother book right there.
Well, yeah. In fact, Glenn Beck, I was on the Glenn Beck show, and he goes, "Well, do you want to spit on me?" And it's like, not. He goes, "Am I famous enough?" It's like, "Well, Glenn, you're very famous, but no, I don't want to spit on you right now." And I think he was almost offended. It's like, well, what? I'm just not famous enough, And a month later, he had James Patterson, the author, on the show, and he goes, well, and James had written a book about Tourette syndrome, and he said, Richard Paul Evans, and I said, yeah, I know Richard, and he goes, well, he has Tourette syndrome. He goes, I didn't know that, and he goes, yeah, he wanted to spit on me.
So let's talk about Glenn Beck for a second. How would you categorize how you helped him with his book?
Oh, I love Glenn. What happened? I had been on Glenn's show many times, just talking about my books. And later on we did the Michael Vey series together. He was my publisher. What happened is he brought to me a Christmas story. It was a Christmas sweater, and he said, "Look," he gave it to me to read, and I read. It was okay. I mean, Glenn didn't do most of the writing. It was done by another author. He doesn't have time to do that. And he called me and he goes, what did you think of the book? I said, it was fine. And he goes, my publisher doesn't like it. They don't want to publish it. And he goes, I don't care about that, but my friends don't like it either. He goes, he goes, what's wrong with it? And I said, well, this is what's wrong. And I said, the book has real potential, but it doesn't reach any of it. I said, the ending, and I started to describe it. Finally, I said, Glenn, look, do you want me to just fix it? And he goes, you want to fix my book? You want to doctor my book? And I go, sure. And he goes, do I want the best-selling Christmas author of our generation to fix my Christmas book? Yes, please. And so I said, okay, this is the deal. Give me the book. I'll take it for the next week. No one touches anything till I'm done. I can't do that. And I'll give it to you. You can do whatever you want with it afterwards. And so I took the book and I rewrote it. And I really liked it. When I was like, oh, this is good. I would publish this. And so then I sent it back to Glenn and didn't talk to him, just sent it to him. And it was funny because like 3 weeks later, and Glenn had been gone during that time. And so I heard from his vice president. He goes, hey, Glenn's really grateful. The publisher loves the book now. And what does he owe you? And I go, what do you mean? I said, well, how much do we owe you? I was like, you don't owe me anything. I just did it for him. He goes, oh, come on, you don't just do that. I go, no, I said, tell you what, my wife got mad at me because I blew off our weekend to fix it. I said, send her some flowers. He goes, well, we're going to do that, but we'll do a lot more. And they sent her some flowers and chocolates. And that was she loved that. And then they called me like a month later and said, you have a book coming out. It's going to be our book of the month. And we're going to promote your book and we're going to put you on air. And it's like they overpaid me for what it was. I mean, to doctor a book like that would probably, on an author at my level, would be about $500,000. So, but I was just doing it as a friend. I was just helping him out. So, anyway,
Wow.
the book was Christmas Sweater. It became a #1 New York Times bestseller. Sold more than 1 million copies, and it did well.
Well, let's segue into the art of writing. And I want to get a few topics because I know we have a few writers on this podcast right now, and we're going to be having more, I'm sure. What is your procedure? You said when you were sick, some things came to you. Does it always happen like that? Do you lock yourself away for a month? I know you've done that when you're going to do the final stages of the book. But how does it start? Do you have inspiration, motivation from anyone or anything?
Boy, it seems like every book is different. And this is perfect because I'm wearing my Write Ranch Repeat. We do writers retreats. Um, I I do lock myself away, but I start with kind of a concept. For instance, some of you have seen, and I don't know if you're going to talk about this, but we had the #1 movie in America last week on Netflix, the Noel Diary, starring Justin Hartley and director Charles Shire. It was #1. It was #2 the week before, and then #1 last week. It's huge, and it's a great movie. But that was based on part of my childhood. When I was a little boy, my mother was suffering from deep depression, and I was cared for by a young unwed mother. My dad was a social worker, and we would bring in he would bring in these young women. Back in those days, if a woman got pregnant, they would just send them away. I don't know if you remember those days, and that's what they did. And I would have these brief memories of this woman, and wasn't until I was older I asked my dad, who was that? Who watched me during that time, because everyone was gone. And he said, Pam. It was Pam. It's like she was this unwed mother, and so I wrote a book somewhat based on that, and that was the Noel Diary. And the weird thing is that woman showed up at my first book signing, the daughter that was born from her, and it was a very interesting story. It was just that she actually was a real person and showed up, and it was a little psychologically, it was too much. I had hundreds of people there, and I said, I can't deal with this right now. I said, we'll have to talk later. It's like, I can't talk to you. But every book has a different path. And so this one, again, I did Christmas memory. I didn't set out to just write it, just start coming to me. And so I do believe in inspiration and muses, and that that everything kind of comes in its own way.
How long roughly does it take you to write a book from start to finish?
About 3.5 months, 4 months, about 4 months.
Okay.
And I edit like crazy, and I write, shorter books. This one is really short. And I asked for that, a Christmas memory. I tried to even keep it shorter. It's about 37,000 words. My first book that sold 8 million copies, and that's not an exaggeration, 8 million copies, was only 16,000 words. It was a novella. Seems like the shorter my books are, the more they sell. And
That's
so,
awesome.
yeah, that was insane. So this one is selling extremely well. It's number 5 on the New York Times bestseller list right now. And it's, but it's like everyone's different, and people say, "Where do you get the idea?" One time I was on the elliptical, and it was my book. I think what was it called? The Christmas. I don't remember, Christmas problem. So it was one of my Christmas stories, and the whole book just came to me. I just saw it like a movie, and I got up and just started to outline as fast as I could, and so people say, where do you find them? It's like, I don't know. They're out there. And Stephen King was once asked how he came up with his ideas, how he made them up. And he said, I find them. They're out there. And I'm more like a archaeologist, dusting the bones, dusting the dirt off dinosaur bones. And the reporter said, I don't believe you. And he said, well, I don't care if you believe me or not, as long as you believe that I believe this. And when I read that, it's like, well, that's exactly what it is. It's like the stories already exist and we just uncover them.
That's awesome. So you and I met kind of through a gentleman named Eros Mackey who does human trafficking rescue missions.
Mm-hmm.
And inadvertently, I was interviewing Eros, and a friend of mine, Jessica Higdon, saw that interview and ended up helping to raise money for Eros's adaptiveops.org. Let's talk about your Christmas Box International, and why did you decide to do that?
Well, and we also still support Eros. I love Eros. What happened is my first book, The Christmas Box, was, once it became big, it was really big. And Carrie and I didn't have a lot of money before that. I think I was making about $30,000 a year. And we lived in a little 1,400 square foot home, only half of it finished, an old home. And but we were happy, and we had little girls, and it was great. Life was good. And all of a sudden, I'm offered $4.25 million for this book. And it was like, it's a big change. That was just the beginning. That wasn't even like movie rights and everything else on top of it, and international rights. And Carrie and I were really concerned. And I was concerned. I'd seen money destroy families and homes. And if I had to choose between the two, I'd choose my family. And so Carrie and I had just met with some financial advisors, and they were showing how to set up trusts and how to make it so if the kids are drug addicts, it's like, whoa, this is not good. And we walked out to our little minivan, and Carrie said, let's just give the money back. And she really meant it. If you know Carrie, she's one of the least material people I've ever met. And I go, well, hold on a second. I have to provide for the family. We're not going to just give it back. I said, why don't we use it for good? And that's when it came with the idea. It's like we wanted to help abused children. And so we started this charity. I had no idea what I was getting into. It was horrible. It was absolutely horrible. The first 4 years were misery. It took all of our money. We were taking out loans. It just about bankrupted us. For 3 years, we had no idea if it was even going to work, because we were just getting pushback from the state and child welfare. It's just like they were so miserable in so many ways, and no one was donating. We'd be getting like $10 donations, and we were building a $2.5 million facility that came in over budget. And so I'm just like, I am draining everything we have, and then it started to work, and God was with me the whole time, because I would pray about it. It's like, I can't go any further here, and then something would happen. And then one time, someone set up a tour with this man, and he's walking through, and he goes, how are you funding all this? And I knew he was wealthy. I didn't know how wealthy. And he had started a business with Mitt Romney. He had started Bain Capital. a very big business. It's been in the news. And, but I didn't know him at all. And I just said, well, I'm funding it. He goes, you're using your own money? And I said, I've used all my money. And in fact, I took out loans for more than $1 million. He's like, what? And he goes, I'm going to help you. And the next day I got a call from his secretary, and he goes, I want you to know that Mr. So-and-so, and he's very humble. He doesn't want to use his name, but he goes, he's sending you $1 million tomorrow. And it's like, wow. And we finished the shelter, and since then we have housed and defended more than 135,000 children.
Unbelievable.
And today it's just fun. I some of those children are adults now, and they come to my book signings, and I meet them, and they're just so grateful. At the hardest time, they say, at the hardest time in my life, I went to this beautiful place where I was cared for and loved and defended, and it's really interesting. I mean, one time, when you're dealing with child welfare, it's, as someone said, that's why the governor has security. And I remember one time I got a phone call and they said, where are you? And I said, just at home. They said, you need to stay low today. There's someone that may be coming to kill you. And I go, what? It's like, yeah, because their kids were taken away, and he just got out of prison, and he has weapons and guns. We have acknowledged it, and he's coming. It's like, oh, that's terrifying. And they caught him. They didn't come to my house, fortunately. Didn't know I lived. He came to the Christmas box house, and the police caught him, and he was armed. And so, kind of the no good deed goes unpunished can happen. But it's been really, I mean, I love the Christmas box house. And if you want to be involved, it's like we're now spreading national, and I can't wait to get down there in Texas. Oh, there's Eros.
Eros is on here now.
I love Eros.
Eros says, hello, friends. I'm so grateful for you both. Thank you, Eros, for being on here. We're going to have to do another podcast soon. And I don't know if you can try to, well, I'd have to send you the link to jump on this now. But Eros, you're the reason why I'm talking to Rick right now. And I appreciate you. And I appreciate you, Rick, for everything that you've done for helping Eros rescue people, but also really giving people a much needed break. I have to read some sort of novel before I go to bed every night because there's so much craziness going on in the world today, and I need to take a mental break from it all. Sometimes my mind is spinning so much with all the chaos, and there's a lot of difficult times for a lot of people. And I want to thank you so much for continuing to write, even when you were sick, but continuing to share your message and your writings with so many people, because it is obviously changing so many people's lives.
Well, it's what I'm supposed to do, right? It's my superpower. So, and that's again the book. If you read one of my books, I would really say, I think men who don't read books like this, you'll like it. You'll relate to the little boy. And but I think it's a really powerful message for today. I think it was a book that was meant for today.
Yep. It's called A Christmas Memory by Richard Paul Evans. Go get it today wherever you get books. Is it in bookstores now?
It's everywhere. Yeah.
It's everywhere now.
Like I said, it's hit 4 bestseller lists already, so it's doing really well.
And it should. Go get it now. It would and grab a few. It would make a great book, a great gift for those people that you love in your life. Rick, thank you so much for joining me today.
Great to be with you, Shmaine. Good to see you, and hopefully we'll see you in December.
Yes, sounds good. All right, everybody, take care. Have a great and blessed day. Bye.
Bye.